In the kingdom of Jera, a boy named Lagier was born, who was the sole heir to the throne. His birth was celebrated with great joy by all, as the child's appearance was exquisite and the subjects believed he would become a worthy successor. However, with time, they came to realize their mistake. From a young age, the boy commanded his guards to punish servants who displeased him with special cruelty. He ordered them to cut off limbs or even chop them in half, watching without a drop of pity. Now, Lagier is a teenager and he has been presented with a gift, a book for summoning demons. It was forbidden in the kingdom, but the hooded man who brought it risked his life to present it as a gift to the prince. Lagier does not trust such a gift and suspects the man brought it with evil intentions. Nevertheless, the man assures the ruler that everything will be fine, and warns that demons should be summoned in solitude. The prince then sends the man away to wait for his reward after a successful summoning, and finally, he can express his dreams of a great war that demons can bring to life. At this moment, Lagier hears the sound of a breaking glass as a maid brings him wine. Unfortunately, she hears what she shouldn't have, and pleas and mercy couldn't save her from death. The boy takes matters into his own hands and ends the maid's life, feeling distraught over having stained himself with her blood. However, his main concern now is to open the book. As soon as he does, the boy experiences anger and disappointment, as the pages are blank. He thought the hooded man had deceived him, but as he touched the book with his bloody hand, he saw a strange glow. He hoped the summoning would work and expressed his desire, but blood started flowing from his nose and eyes. Afterward, the prince fell to the ground, and the book flew up. The demon king does not understand where he is or what has happened. Darkness surrounds him, and he sees the summoning circle. The last thing he remembers is responding to the call just out of boredom. The demon opens his eyes, feeling sweat running down his face, something that has never happened before. He looks at his hands and realizes that his fingers look too swollen. Jumping up, he runs to the mirror and sees that his entire body is as swollen as his fingers. The demon cannot believe it. The man who summoned him died during the ritual, and his body and soul were given to the demon. If the prince could not withstand the contract, then how did the ritual even take place? Perhaps because he is a member of the royal family and the goddess of the sea protects him. It is quite possible that he was able to perform the summoning, but immediately died, choking on his own blood. Now, as the contract's executor, the demon must remain in the summoner's body until he fulfills his wishes. In such a short time, the boy managed to express 2 wishes, to endow him with great power and make him the ruler of the entire world. The demon sits on a chair and its leg breaks. He realizes that he needs to lose weight first. The next morning, the prince is served a sumptuous meal, and the servants are very careful in their interactions with him, conveying the king's concern about his son's condition. Since everyone in the castle thinks the maid who brought the wine tried to poison the boy, it works out well for the demon. The boy asks to clear the table of all the food and prepare everything necessary for tomorrow's sports activities. Everyone is shocked that the prince has decided to take up sports for the first time in his life. Returning to his room, the king of hell feels uncomfortable in his swollen body. He could use magic to get rid of the excess weight, but it could cause problems. So he decides to call on Thanatos for help. He bites his finger until it bleeds and summons the demon servant. A small dragon appears. At first, he does not recognize the king of hell in his human body, but once he realizes who is in front of him, he immediately starts flying around the demon happily, having missed him so much. This annoys the king quite a bit. As it turned out, the talking dragon was already aware of the contract that bound his master to the prince of this world. However, upon hearing the wish that was made by the demon, the dragon was horrified. He scolded the former owner of the body, but the demon berated the servant, for he was still the summoner of the demon king. Nevertheless, it was impossible to make 2 wishes at the same time, and the servant did not understand how this brat had managed to wish for both power and control over the world. The demon, on the other hand, seemed resigned to his fate. Since Tay was a son of a lineage of demonic dragons and had inherited the knowledge of his ancestors at birth, the master assumed that the servant could give him advice on how to quickly and effectively lose weight. However, the dragon could only give simple advice that was known to everyone and suggest trying to expend energy on mental activity as well. In order to continue carrying out the king's orders, the demon needed a more convenient body than a small dragon. The servant came into the prince's chambers and the demon ordered the dragon to consume the servant's body. Later, the prince walked down the hallway with his servant, Tay, heading to his training session. His horse was already prepared, and another servant asked His Highness if he would be able to mount the horse himself. This seemed insulting, but the prince also realized that the horse would hardly be able to bear his heavy weight. Therefore, he decided to walk to the training grounds. The path uphill became steep, and after a while, it became very difficult for the prince to continue walking. His body was too weak, and the servant suggested that they turn back, but the Demon King was determined to keep going until he lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness in his chambers, the king was shocked at how poor the prince's endurance was and intended to keep trying, even though poor Tay had to keep carrying him back on his back. After a month of struggling to reach the training grounds, the prince is now able to walk for many hours. Tay is pleased with his master's progress, but the prince himself is worried about what might be happening in the demon world during his absence. His concerns are confirmed when Tay tells him that terrible chaos has erupted in their home world since the king's disappearance. Although only a month has passed on Earth, much more time has elapsed in the demon world, and problems may arise, particularly if their enemies start plotting something. He needs to fulfill the terms of the contract as soon as possible and return home. Finally, the main character reaches the training grounds, where he is greeted by the head of the place, who begins to flatter the prince in every way. The demon dislikes such behavior towards a subordinate, and even twists some of his words against him. He is eager to start training as soon as possible. He approaches the future knights who are learning to fight with swords, and they all bow to him except for one. This boy continues to strike the dummy with his sword, which is sharpened on only one side. The head immediately scolds the ignorant young man, and he finally breaks the dummy, which he imagined to be a shadow. Only then does he bow to his highness. It turns out that he is a commoner who got this position by winning a competition. The demon likes the boy's qualities and asks him to be his trainer. The prince recounts the story of his sword, which was once just an accessory to him. Recently, one of his servants attempted to kill him, prompting the prince to learn how to wield a sword in order to protect himself. This is why he needs to lose weight, and it will be the task of the young man to train his highness until the excess weight is gone. The young man politely declines the request, citing his lack of skill, but the demon tries to morally pressure him, accusing him of wishing for the prince's death. Since excess weight in itself poses a threat to life, not to mention possible assassination attempts, the future knight proposes to test his skills and have a duel with the prince's servant, to which Tay is very surprised. The duel takes place immediately, and as soon as Tay takes the wooden sword in his hand, the young man keenly observes that he is not a novice in handling weapons. This impresses and shows professionalism. During the fight, the future knight even refuses to use one of his hands, since the fight is not with a knight. The demon servant also does not fight at full strength with a mere mortal. With the first attack, the young man realizes that the servant is succumbing and asks him not to do so. Then the blow becomes stronger and more unexpected, as the dragon decides to take the fight seriously for his master's sake. Nevertheless, his opponent does not give up and successfully blocks another attack, only to be unexpectedly attacked by Tay again. The young man skillfully dodges the attack, and then grabs his opponent's sword, striking him painfully on the shoulder. Thus, Hweon Whale, the knight's apprentice, becomes the victor. Later, the main character and his servant return to the castle. The prince can barely walk, exhausted, while Tay is shining with admiration for the young man who defeated him. He hardly seems human with his skills. The demon is surprised that his servant does not worry about his defeat, but instead looks very happy. He also notices the young man's excellent abilities and realizes he could become the prince's main sword. Tay's happiness stems from fulfilling his master's orders, but the apprentice does not seem suitable for the role of trainer. Although he possesses keen intuition, he needs to acquire some basic skills. The main character regrets that his loyal hellhound assistant is not by his side, but he is needed to manage the situation in the demon world. Nevertheless, the dog is ranked third in the demon world, only surpassed in strength by the sinner Lucifer and the king himself. The prince rises from the ground, having rested a bit. He walks forward, admiring the sunset in the human world. The next day, the prince is back in the training camp, trying to persuade the young man to become his trainer. Hweon refuses, resolute in his decision. The chief becomes angry with Hweon and continues to flatter the prince inappropriately. Then, he accidentally insults the ruler with one of his compliments. After an awkward pause, the man departs, and the prince continues his conversation with the young man. He explains his goal once again and speaks of how rulers always need a pretext for their actions, as they are constantly being watched. He also complains that no one does anything for him voluntarily. Finally, after 5 months, the prince is in perfect shape, and the demon's efforts were not in vain. The demon king admires his own body, but is taken aback by the sudden appearance of the dragon. As the prince exits the room, he refuses another accessory for his clothing. Hweon, who is waiting outside, bows to the prince and follows him. 5 months ago, he had told the prince that his goal was not to serve the royal family or become one of the knights, but to fight in the vanguard and become the commander-in-chief. At present, such a position does not exist in their state, but he is willing to do anything to achieve his goal, even to cross the sea. The Demon King points out his mistaken expression and reveals his plan to conquer the world in order to intrigue the young man who is thirsty for battle. During their conversation, Hweon notices a red flash in the prince's eyes. Now, the trio is leaving the palace, and the dragon is giving the king a detailed account of the harvest festival. The week of worshipping the goddess of the sea, who protects their state, is celebrated by offering her the best of the harvest. Usually, the prince refused to participate in this tradition because of his terrible fear of water. However, now the Demon King needs the goddess's support during the war, or at least her blessing to transport troops across the sea. One of the servants has already prepared a carriage, but the prince requests his horse instead, as he is very kind to animals unlike people. The dragon brings him a cloak and the main character sets off on his journey. The people of the city are rejoicing at the festival, and everyone is certain that the prince will not come. Ever since his childhood, when his nanny failed to watch over him and he fell into the water, he has avoided bodies of water. Everyone was afraid to say this to the ruler's face, but privately they all condemned him. The ceremony for the goddess has begun, with the king's aide delivering a speech, when the crowd began to gather around and the sound of horse hooves could be heard. The prince appeared with his closest servants, Hweon and the dragon. The crowd was shocked at the sight of the prince's slim figure. Many whispered that he was a bastard, and even the royal guards surrounded him with swords drawn. They only let him pass on the king's orders. The queen wept as her son was so emaciated and regretted not taking better care of him all these days. The king ordered the ceremony to continue, and it was during the ceremony that the person who would climb aboard the ship and offer the first tribute to the goddess would be the prince. Everyone was amazed when it was revealed that the beautiful young man was indeed the prince. His mother begged the king to stop and not send their son aboard the ship, as it was too much for their fearful child, but the king was relentless. The people rejoiced at the start of the ceremony, and that the prince would be boarding the ship. On the ship, the main character and the dragon watched the sea creatures towing the ship from the deck. To the servant, one of them looked like Ray, his master's faithful hound, but the king disagreed, claiming that his own dog was 100 times better than all of them, even the dragon by his side. Hweon approached the prince from behind, urging him not to stand too close to the edge, and asked about Ray. His surprise was evident when he learned that His Majesty had raised a puppy. In any case, they were expected to reach their destination by evening, and the main character was already dreaming of meeting the goddess. At the bottom of the sea, a creature resembling a fox was bound in chains and accused the prince of never visiting him. As night falls, the ship arrives at its destination. The time for the sacred ritual has come. On board is a priest, and the main character remembers searching for the person who gave the prince the book for summoning demons. That person was also a priest, but he is definitely not on the ship. Therefore, the Demon King simply reminds his servant to continue the search upon arrival, as that person has still not been found, and his motives remain unknown. It is time for the offering. The priest asks the prince to use the blood of a member of the royal family to summon the goddess of the sea. The main character does this without hesitation, even injuring his hand too much as he drips blood into the water. The characteristic sounds signify that the goddess has awakened. A creature resembling a fox emerges from the sea and expresses its anger towards the young man who never visited her. 15 years of his life have passed. After that, the creature drags the prince underwater. The main character is not concerned, and he silently asks his servants to wait for him and rushes after the goddess. Underwater, she continues to scold the young man for not upholding the tradition of his family to visit the creature that vowed to protect the country in exchange for offerings. The Demon King realizes that this is not the goddess of the sea, but a celestial fox that was imprisoned here for her sins. He begins to speak telepathically with her, which surprises the fox since humans cannot usually do this. He apologizes for leaving the fox there for so many years, even though he did not do it, and he still feels sorry for it. He lovingly asks the crying fox not to do this again to humans because their bodies are weak, and they can die. After a while, Sedna manages to calm her tears. She is surprised to see a demon in front of her, but she does not fear him as she has already been punished by the Heavenly King, so the demons do not intimidate her. Suddenly, she notices a wound on the non-human body and offers to heal it. Though Sedna is in chains, her powers remain with her. After ensuring that the creature is not angry, the main character prepares to leave. Sedna asks him to stay with her for a while, as she is very tired of being alone. Then, the Demon King Imbilden offers her to make a wish that he will grant. The fox can think of nothing better than to ask for more visits. She is afraid that people will forget her again, as there are many disgusting things at the bottom of the sea, such as garbage and corpses. She even begins to go crazy, talking to fish and seaweed. The young man offers Sedna to make a wish again. It becomes clear that she really wants freedom. The prince agrees to fulfill her wish when she pronounces his name, Sedna. Now, the demon approaches the chains holding the creature and breaks one chain first. His hand gets burned, but the celestial ruler has done enough to help her. However, the king breaks the second chain as well. During the process, Sedna begs him not to do this, as he has already done enough to help her. Nonetheless, the fox is now free. However, as soon as she takes a few steps, the prince falls and loses consciousness. He should not have pushed himself so much, as the human body is weak. Sedna hopes to bring him back to the surface and save him before it is too late. The lightning flashed in the dark night, the ship barely withstood the storm, being hit by bigger waves and swaying from side to side. Hweon Whale, who was worried about his majesty, gazed gloomily into the water. He was very interested in what was happening on the seabed. With a big splash, a white creature resembling a mythical fox of large size, with red eyes, long ears and fur, emerged from the water, along with a bright pink sphere that turned out to be his majesty. The sphere and the unknown creature descended onto the deck of the ship. The creature from the depths used magic, and in an instant, the storm subsided above the ship and the sun appeared. The sailors were very surprised. The fox suddenly turned its attention to Thanatos, noticing that he was a demonic dragon. The people on the ship implored the sea goddess, the same creature, not to be angry with them. With her magic, the goddess forced the pink sphere to crack, revealing the sleeping main hero inside. Hweon Whale rushed to his body. His majesty was unconscious. The people rejoiced that Imbilden was unharmed. The sea goddess spoke to the people, announcing that she was bestowing her blessing upon the main hero, as he would become the ruler of Jarira in the future. She summoned him to become her second contractee, offering to open any sea route for him in return. She provided evidence of their contract. The king finally woke up in his bed. Thanatos greeted him joyfully. It turned out that his majesty had been unconscious for 2 days. The youth was worried about the main hero, but he quickly reassured him, telling him about his mistake. Imbilden explained that the sea goddess had been bound by an angelic ring at the king's command, and now the ring was with the main hero. The youth argued with the king about the situation, explaining it was due to his concern, and then asked his majesty to be careful. Standing on the balcony, the king and his father watched the people's joy in response to the contract with the goddess. The man told Imbilden that this was a great event for the whole country. In the evening, after the banquet in honor of the event, the exhausted main hero finally fell onto his bed, wishing to rest. In the darkness of the night, a small white fox, the sea goddess in a reduced form, crept through the open window. Sedna told the king about the mark on his body, while at the same time settling into his bed. With a pitiful look, she obtained permission to stay. With the first rays of the sun, the demon dragon appears in the protagonist's bedroom, where he is peacefully sleeping with Sedna, initially beside her and later beside him. The youth brings a comely collar with a bell by order of Imbilden for the fox goddess. The fox is not pleased with the collar, but his majesty forbids her from taking it off, as it will be undeniable evidence of her official presence in the palace. The king decides in this way to deceive everyone else, including the heavenly king, that the fox is not a goddess, but a messenger of the goddess. In the end, the fox agrees, for which the protagonist kindly praises her, while the demon youth watches discontentedly. The gossipers discuss the prince and his fox, while Imbilden tells the goddess about the difference between love and sympathy. This puts the fox into reflection, and as a result, she decides that she loves the king. On the horizon, Thanatos appears and announces the arrival of envoys from the great power of Kaunas, where a new emperor has recently ascended to the throne by very cruel means. The envoys arrive to invite his majesty to the coronation of the emperor of Kaunas. The protagonist's father has already informed the envoys that his son will attend the ceremony, but apparently, the envoys are very surprised and bewildered by this response. They expected a complete rejection from the royal family, as it turns out that the invitation was just an act of politeness, and nobody actually expected agreement. The prince appears before the envoys very unexpectedly, from behind, which scares them and distracts them from their thoughts. The arriving guests bow to the protagonist's feet, apologizing for the rudeness they had previously shown towards him. Later, in his bedroom, the protagonist reflects on the difficulty of communicating with his mother, as he is not accustomed to understanding the term parents at all. Therefore, he cannot comprehend the queen's concern for her son. Thanatos asks His Majesty for permission to return to the demon world for a while to check the situation there. But instead, Imbildon suggests a similar solution to the situation, and opening a demonic portal, summons the Book of Death and Birth of Demons. With the help of magic, the demonic book begins to rapidly turn its pages, glowing with red light, providing information for the protagonist. Thanks to it, Imbildon learns that nothing has changed in the demon world. The dragon youth exhales in relief at the good news from the king's mouth. He explains to the fox the significance of the demonic book and what it can tell him, while simultaneously contemplating whether he can use his book in this world. In the next moment, the king dissolves the book in the air, apparently returning it back to the demon world, and then summons another one, similar to the first, but blue with a bright blue glow. The first book contains records of demons, and the second describes the king of demons' relationship with humans. He clarifies, Sedna is the first name on the list in this book, which she is very pleased about. After that, the man comes up with a name for the second book, the Book of Lagier. On a sunny day, the protagonist, together with his servant demon and Hwion, are once again on a ship. The great crew of the king's subjects is with them, which slightly irritates His Majesty. It turns out that this is an order from the protagonist's father to protect his son's knights during the journey, so that his mother, the queen of the state, can be calm about him. His Majesty expresses his distrust of his father's subordinates, calling them the king's dogs. With a brazen smile, he approaches the chief knight, to whom he assigns the task of writing down all the names of the knights in his special magical book, followed by signatures. He asks Hwion to do the same. Without revealing details, Imbildon manages to persuade them to carry out the order. After the execution of the King of Demons' order, he can easily command them, and therefore he asks them to return to him. The people written in the book will not be able to disobey the king's orders until their death. Soon, the ship approaches the shores of the Kana's empire, where the locals notice him. They are very surprised by His Majesty's appearance, especially his hair color. Everyone in the area knew about the prince's arrival in Kanas. They greet him with a friendly reception, providing a large carriage that will take them to the hotel. On the same evening, the man is informed of where and when the coronation of the new emperor will take place. The fox goddess immediately suggests going for a walk upon arrival at the hotel, actively seducing the king of demons with something that she considers valuable. Naturally, Imbildon refuses her due to exhaustion, sending her to walk alone. The next morning, the king starts to worry about the absence of the goddess of the sea. It seems that nobody has seen her for a while. Hwion explains that the fox went for a walk in the village in the morning. Imbildon is shocked to hear this, as he never thought she would actually go alone. Disrupting the night's breakfast, the Demon King sadly informs them of the bad news about his beloved fox's disappearance. He explains that she needs to be found as soon as possible and sends the knights to the capital alone, while he promises to catch up with them later after finding the goddess of the sea himself. The knights are against this plan and intend to go with him, but they receive a negative response from the prince. Unfortunately, they have no choice but to obey him. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, the snow-white fox walks alone through the streets, which surprises the locals. Attracting excessive attention, the goddess finds herself in situations where everyone wants to do something with her. Children want to play, girls want to pet her. The children try to persuade the fox to play with them, and when she refuses, they try to grab her by force. Luckily, Sedna manages to escape. She then wanders the streets, eats the food she desires, and rests as she pleases. However, she is saddened by the absence of the Demon King by her side, and this causes her to become depressed, planning to return back to him. On her way back, she meets a flock of white doves in the square and is fascinated by them, running towards them. They fly away, apparently scared, except for one. Only one dove stays and starts to talk to the goddess, introducing himself as Zadkiel. Then he transforms into an angel with human form and wings. Sedna is very happy to see him. The man tells her why he is in the empire right now and asks her about the same, as the king imprisoned her deep underwater with a heavenly ring. The goddess of the sea is bewildered and does not know what to say to her angel friend. The man says that he will report this to the heavens, but Sedna responds with tears and begs him not to do it. The fox clung to the leg of the angel, unwilling to let go in order to keep her secret hidden. The angel made a great effort to get her off his leg. The goddess accidentally let the angel know that the ring of heaven was broken, which made the man even more angry. The enraged man gave the old advice to his friend to return to her place of exile, and wait for a new punishment for her new sin. In the conversation between the angel and the goddess, the main hero intervenes, protesting against such an outcome. He reminds the fox of the concluded contract. While the angel is in shock as His Majesty, the demon king, was able to see and pass through his barrier. Sedna tells the angel that there is a mark on the king, making the contract valid. The contract is more sacred than a command of the heavenly king. As long as Imbilden lives, the angel cannot take the sea goddess. She is in his power. The king calls the goddess to him, and she jumps into his embrace with joy. The angel continues to threaten them, but the king threatens back with his demonic servant, Thanatos. This shocks Zadkiel, but the king is adamant and continues his threats, talking about a possible war between worlds if the angel reports what is happening. Memories of similar battles appear in the young angel's mind, frightening him. However, he is confident that such a servant cannot be found with a mortal prince. In response to this, a huge, dark dragon demon appears behind him. Shock and fear force the angel to fall to the ground. Already in the hotel, the king looks at the pigeon that was previously an angel, continuing his threats in front of the feathered one. The man tries to shut his mouth with his favorite methods. The angel informs him that he will hide the truth about the situation for a while, but if asked by the heavenly king, he will be obliged to tell the truth. The demon king forces the feathered angel to promise and sign his book. Imbilden releases the pigeon immediately after signing. Late at night, the royal family of the empire was traveling to the capital in a carriage escorted by knights. 3 knights were riding ahead and 2 more were riding behind the carriage, which had lanterns hanging from it to light the way. His Majesty was looking out the window with boredom, while Hweon was reporting to him about the next stages of their journey. Further down the road was a bridge that crossed a river. In the carriage of the Demon King, his servant, the dragon, enthusiastically talked about the peculiarities of this bridge and other facts. The bridge was entirely transparent, causing people who crossed it to feel as if they were walking on air, and locals referred to it as the Bridge of Dreams. Hweon, riding a horse next to the carriage, reflected on the difficulty of constructing such a bridge, while Imbilden pondered the drawbacks of his own country. The demon dragon shared astonishing news. According to the book, this bridge was not built by humans, but by earthly elves. Hweon didn't believe it, assuming they had long since died out, while His Majesty was only slightly surprised. Tay stated that the Empire of Kaunas carefully protected its elves. The Demon King had never seen Earth elves before and had very strange ideas about them. Finally, the carriage made its way across the bridge on foot, as it was not safe for carriages to cross it. Hweon was afraid of heights, so he was uneasy about walking on the transparent bridge. Upon learning of this, the king provided him with support, urging him to admire His Majesty. White birds, heavenly creatures, flew above them in a hurry, searching for someone or something. The fox goddess was worried that a flock of birds might be after her, but to her joy, Sedna saw them pass by. The demon king ordered his servant dragon to find the whereabouts of the earth elf dwellings at any cost. The demon youth was somewhat uncertain about his ability to perform the task due to the heavenly servants, but still agreed under the pressure of his lord's orders. The demon king imbued the goddess fox's collar with demonic energy so that she could protect the sea goddess from heavenly beings. Meanwhile, Thanatos was in a village, diligently searching for the homes of the elves. This task had put him in a bind, so he was very flustered. Unexpectedly, the demon youth stumbled upon a group of people who were previously robbers. They pretended to be good Samaritans and offered their help to the demon. When it became clear what the demon needed help with, the people looked at each other in surprise. The group of men deemed the demon dragon's words as mere delusions, as the earthly elves appeared to be something unreal. The demon explained that it was his master's orders. Tay became engrossed and began praising his master in front of the strangers, and later complained about his master's cruelty. The boys were clearly unimpressed with the protagonist. The group of men agreed to help him and reveal the location of the elves in exchange for money. The demon naively agreed to pay whatever they demanded. For the robbers, this was a stroke of luck. They decided to take everything from the boy, so one of the criminals hit the servant from behind with a wooden bat. He fell, and the men took his bag, which turned out to be full of various precious stones. The boys were overjoyed with their find and hurriedly left, wanting to leave the city if the precious stones turned out to be genuine. From behind them, they heard something strange, like a mix of coughing and laughter. The leader of the gang turned around to look and noticed that the demon servant had risen to his feet despite the crushing blow to his head. Blood was flowing from his head, and he spoke bitterly, saying that his body now looked terrible. This frightened the robbers to no end. In the next moment, Tay revealed his demonic wings and tail, exposing his true form to the humans. With his dragon tail, the youth grabbed the gang leader and squeezed him tightly. The boy dropped the bag of stolen precious stones, and the rest of the gang threw him and his friend away, saving their lives from the demon. The demon servant dispatched all of the bandits, obtaining their life force and restoring his own. At the end of the battle, he noticed the earthly elves watching from afar. Two twin girls who looked exactly like the book had described them, with the appearance of a human, a cat, and a butterfly. The demon intentionally created such a commotion to attract the elves, and his plan worked. No one likes disorder in his territory. The elf sisters were afraid of the demon but still told him about their weaknesses. The dragon servant decided to give the precious stones to the elves, as anything shiny was their weakness, in exchange for them going with him to his master. Surprisingly, the elves agreed. And so, the two girls stood before the king as he looked at them skeptically. Not forgetting to praise his servant, His Majesty examined the appearance of the earthly elves. Meanwhile, the girls told the man that they loved everything beautiful, and that is why they liked the king. They praised his appearance, especially his hair and black color. Thanatos intervenes in the situation, angrily stopping the elves from touching the king and explaining that elves can see through souls, thus knowing who is before them. The girls made a mistake due to their poor language skills, calling the color black instead of white, and were caught by the demon dragon. One girl silences the other, ordering her not to speak of the black color anymore, and the other agrees. The servant rudely throws one girl onto the other. A sea goddess enters the room and notices the girls, asking who they are, while the sisters gaze admiringly at the fox. The girls begin to hug Sedna, and the demon king goes to sleep. Late at night, everyone is asleep, but the call of their queen wakes up the elves, so they take off and fly home. The demon servant stops them, blocking their way and not allowing them to leave without the permission of his master. The girls are unhappy with this and become angry. They make a shrill sound that wakes up the demon king, who stops the quarrel and agrees to go with the sisters to answer the queen's call. Bilden and his assistants, the demon and Hwion, together with the goddess Fox and the elven girls, head to the hideout of the borrowed elves. Hwan considers this to be too dangerous. His Majesty appeals to the man's compassion, telling tales of his weak heart, forcing him not only to agree to go, but also to sympathize with him. The elven sisters lead everyone under a glass bridge. Using their wing magic, they open the barrier that previously blocked the entrance. At the site of the opening portal, there is a precipice that humans cannot descend without wings. The other elven girls successfully led the group to their home. The main hero and Hwan were ashamed of such a way of descent, while only the demon dragon felt joy for the safe journey down. Following them, the portal closed and once again concealed their hideout with the elves' barrier. However, a few celestial birds managed to notice the magical entrance, including Zakiel. Meanwhile, the slow descent to the Earth Elves' hideout was almost complete. The company noticed light at the end of the tunnel and eventually arrived there. It was too bright and dazzling, a sparkling garden that turned out to be the home of the elves. Bronze statues, precious flowers, and a large tree with small elf houses nestled in it, resembling the fruit of the tree in their attachment. In the center, a large statue sat atop the company, with the queen of the elves perched on it. The girl welcomed the guests, introducing herself as Hyan, the queen of the elves. Her wings were much larger and she looked much older than her wards, betraying her status. Standing on a precious flower, the queen was delighted to meet the demon king, letting him know that she knew his true nature. His Majesty was also pleased with the meeting. The demon king tells Hyan that the purpose of his visit is the earth elves' special talent for skilled construction. Bilden wants to bring the elves to his country to improve the construction and architecture of his state. The queen hints at a refusal, and to his surprise, the king easily agrees with her. He is more interested in the absence of trouble, which is why she called her wards. The demon thinks the reason is false. The queen hurries to prove otherwise, showing her precious flower, opening it, and pointing to the fruit inside. The sea goddess and the demon king seem to understand what is in front of them and are very shocked. The queen of the earth elves explains that her subordinates found it on the road, so they brought it to their hideout, as it could have been damaged or fallen into the hands of humans, which would be terrible in both cases. The fox goddess does not believe this at all, and Bilden tries to calm her down. The fruit turns out to be the next heavenly king's fruit, the fruit that gives birth to celestial creatures. In this case, the fruit for the next generation celestial king is now before them. It is now clear why the celestial birds were actively searching for it. His Majesty, the Demon King, sincerely does not believe that the item was just lying on the road. The situation is full of absurdity and so it shocks him deeply. The Demon King warns the Elven Queen of the dangers and risks of keeping the fruit in their lair. The girl understands the danger, especially as the celestial beings have concluded that the elves stole the fruit instead of finding it. The Demon King laughs, telling Hyan that no one will believe her. At the same time, she asks him to take the fruit in exchange for her elves to help build in his country. This shocks Imbilden. A wicked aura of powerful demonic energy surrounds the demon. The queen asserts that she is confident that the king will not destroy the fruit. She openly appeals to his mercy, hoping to sway him to help. The sea goddess intervenes and tearfully implores the demon king to return the precious egg and assist her. Finally, His Majesty Imbilden agrees to help the elven queen Hyan. The company decides to think of a safe way to return the egg. It is time for a feast. The demon king is served beetles for dinner, which he clearly does not enjoy. He refuses and gives the food to his servant. The king explains the difficulty of the situation to Hyan. He cannot show his true form, much less use his demonic power. Sedna is hidden, and so they cannot seek the queen's power. However, the probability of danger to them and the empire with which the elves have a deal is high. The demon comforts the queen, saying that it is not her fault. The queen agrees to take the risks and will return the celestial fruit to another world. In the next moment, the elf's house begins to crumble. It seems the celestial beings have come to retrieve the egg. The main character grabs the hand of the elven queen just as a huge stone falls on them, narrowly missing the demon king and his dragon servant. Hwan rushes to them, frightened for His Majesty's safety. Meanwhile, the fox cannot understand what has happened. The elves fly to their queen, equally frightened for her. In that moment, angels appear. The fox holds the egg in her hands, trying not to lose it in the chaos. The queen is angry with the angels, but they have only come to retrieve what is theirs. Hwan is ready to draw his sword, feeling the tension rising, but his lord only gives him a look, signaling him not to do so. The knight is very scared of the dangerous situation. The angels threaten the elves, and the queen is furious at their words. They had been taking care of the egg, where the child of their future ruler resides, and these angels dare to barge in and threaten them. The celestial beings do not apologize, but continue to issue threats, even when they hear that the egg was found in the human world by the elves in search of precious stones, and brought it to their home. They had planned to return it anyway, but if the angels have come for it, they can take it now. The queen takes the egg and hands it over to the celestial messengers, but they still imply that punishment may be waiting for the elves. Before leaving, the demon king hears the future ruler in the egg calling him by name and offering to meet again. He tells the dragon about it, but the dragon insists it is impossible. The elves rejoice that everything ended well. Their guests are getting ready to leave and the queen thanks them for their help, although in the opinion of the main character, they didn't do anything outstanding. Now the ruler understands that to protect the others, she needs to get rid of her own fear. She plans to send the twins Rin Shushu and Run Shushu to the surface together with the guests. Although their negotiations may not be successful, the children can go there as an excursion. The king of demons is worried about the queen's eyes. She has never opened them since her coronation, and he thinks she's wounded. However, it turns out that this is not the case. She can turn anyone to stone just by looking at them. This ability is unique to the queen, and she hasn't opened her eyes since her coronation. The queen really wants to see the sea, but she's afraid that someone will be hurt. Nevertheless, the demon king convinces her to go. They stand on a high cliff by the sea, and finally the elf queen opens her eyes with delight as she looks at the world around her. Suddenly, she meets eyes with the demon king and immediately becomes scared, falling to the ground and covering her eyes with her hands. Her surprise is immense when she discovers that the demon king is unharmed. It turns out that her magic does not work on him. The queen thanks him again for everything and promises her help if necessary. To this end, Imbilden asks her to sign a book containing the names of everyone with whom he has a contract, and after some hesitation, the queen signs it. Now, if he needs help, he only has to pass the information through the twins. The company arrives in the city of Kanasia for the coronation. It is a bustling capital living its active life. As soon as the travelers left the carriage, they were a little bewildered. Everything around was especially interesting to the elven twins. While they admired everything around, the dragon warned them to stay close since it is easy to get lost in a big city. Though the master did not give an order, the elves are susceptible to anything bright and may easily fall behind the group. The servant also suggested the prince to take a safer path, but he decided to cut through where it was shorter. The elves got distracted by one of the shop windows and now they cannot catch up with the rest. They are almost hit by a carriage, but the coachman brakes in time. An aristocrat gets out of the carriage and asks for forgiveness from the elves. He is kind to the boys and offers them a ride, but in reality, he wants to make them his slaves or sell them. They see it just in time, thanks to their ability, and refuse to go with him. However, the greedy man is not going to let them go and grabs one of the twins by the wing, painfully pulling him towards him. At that moment, the main character and a stranger in a hood appear, and they simultaneously strike the impertinent man, forcing him to release the elves. The unknown young man is covered in scars, and he teases the main hero with his jokes. The aristocrat is angry and, at the noise, the guards rush over. The man immediately tells them to arrest those who dared to attack him. The elves tremble with fear, and their protectors are ready to fight. The guards offer the option to surrender voluntarily, but no one of course intends to comply. Hweon and other knights who came with him rush to help the prince. Everyone is in shock when they find out that the person before them is the prince of another kingdom. No one expected to meet him under such circumstances. After it was all over, the elves are scolded for leaving without permission, and they feel very ashamed. The king orders them not to run so far away to observe something again. He also reprimands the young man who helped him, instead of showing gratitude for his uninvited assistance. Furthermore, a stranger advises the young man not to congratulate the emperor on his coronation, as he killed 4 people, 2 of whom were children, to ascend to the throne. The main character rudely responds to the unsolicited advice. The stranger leaves, calling the prince the father of the elves. Upon arrival at the palace, the fox and elves rejoice in the soft beds and are eager to rest as soon as possible. The master decides to take a stroll and observe life in the imperial palace. Hweon insists that the main character should not go alone, as it would be inappropriate for the prince's reputation to wander around the palace alone at such a time. The young man thinks the knight has made a good point and listens to his advice, inviting his dragon servant along. He still cannot get used to the fact that there is a constant moral war going on between the aristocracy and the human world. It seems strange to the Demon King, as in his world, wars are measured by strength, not psychological oppression. In the garden, the girls discuss the princess with beautiful white skin who sits among them. Rumors are circulating that they have seen the emperor with their own eyes, and it turns out to be true. When the girl becomes cold, the emperor gallantly offers her his cloak. Everyone is thrilled with her story, and at that moment, they notice a young man walking through the garden. It turns out to be the main character. The girl who told the story about meeting the emperor calls out to him to say hello. She introduces herself as Ilgadel, the princess of the kingdom of Frederick. The girl politely invites the prince to join her and the other princesses for tea. The young man accepts the offer and everyone is pleased to welcome him at the table. After a while, the protagonist notes that it's already very late and suggests they end the conversation with 2 questions for each other. His new acquaintance begins first, inquiring about the sea goddess who protects their country and what she's like in person. The Demon King speaks the truth about his friendship with the goddess and how she marked him during their first encounter, dragging him to the sea floor. The second question pertains to the diplomatic aspect of the young man's country and reveals the girl's interest in the magical ore, which is imbued with extraordinary properties and sought after by many rulers. It is, however, hidden beneath the waves surrounding the prince's country. He answers the question reservedly, as he knows the sensitivity of the topic, and even puts her in a bind with regards to the possibility of an alliance between his country and the empire. It's time for the demon lord to ask his questions, and he intends to address the emperor who has just appeared behind the girl's back. Inside the castle, the future emperor laughs at the fact that the main character did not recognize him on the street. It was he who helped the elves and played a prank on the prince of the neighboring country. As it turned out, he simply couldn't stay inside the castle any longer, so he didn't even worry about what people would think if his true identity were revealed. When the Demon King asks the emperor why he helped the elves, he explains that it was all because of his sister and brother. If they hadn't died, they would be the same age as those kids. Initially, only his mother and siblings were the ones who supported him. He didn't need power, just his family. But soon they died in an accident, and he realized that he could only protect the people he loves by coming to power. Everyone probably knows the sins the emperor committed to achieve this coronation. The goddess Fox wakes his highness, offering to take a walk around the capital of the empire. The man is not pleased with such an offer, but this time he suggests the sea goddess to take a walk with his personal demon attendant instead. A soft knock on the door. 2 people enter the room, Hweon and the demon dragon servant of the king of demons. The latter informs the king that his majesty, the emperor, has invited them to breakfast at Imbilden. This is not to the liking of the high-ranking demon, but he accepts the invitation as he has no choice. The servant persuades the king to take this step. The demon king enters the banquet hall, where other people are already feasting. For breakfast, the people of noble blood of the Empire of Kaunas were invited, as well as the representative of Gerara in the person of the prince of the country, the main character. His Excellency Imbilden is very surprised by such a large number of people. He does not like this turn of events at all. The man naively assumed that they would be alone. Walking through the banquet hall, the demon passes through other people's tables, attracting the attention of the aristocracy to his person. The admiring and surprised gazes of the people accompanied the demon king on his way to his table. Passing by another table, the main character notices an aristocrat whom he had previously met on the street. That same scoundrel who tried to kidnap the elf sisters was sitting nearby and also recognized His Highness the Prince. The poor man was so shocked that he even fell off his chair, leaning back. And Imbilden quietly laughed at this, turning his attention to the man who humiliatingly lay on the floor. The emperor entered the hall and all the people stood up to show their respect for the ruler. With a smile on his face, he wished all the guests a good morning, then noticed the king of demons and waved to him. Following this, the emperor expressed his displeasure with the emotions of the aristocracy that hung in the hall. Melancholy, people hastily tried to convince him otherwise. Obviously, they were afraid of him. The scoundrel who had previously fallen off his chair dared to complain to the emperor about the envoy of another country, mentioning the situation that had occurred earlier, but in a completely different way. Had the emperor not been the same person who had helped the demon in battle, he might have believed the man's story. Instead, the man believed in his opponent's version of events, carefully hiding his involvement in the situation from everyone. The emperor accused the aristocrat, and then approached him with a sword, instilling fear in those around him. The man caused wild fear in the aristocrat, threatening him with his sword, concluding that he was guilty of what had happened, and furthermore, had broken 2 laws of the Kaunas Empire. Instead of trying to refute the accusations, the culprit naively attempted to compel the emperor to first punish the envoy, the prince of another country. This only exacerbated the situation for the poor man. Bending over the offender's shoulder, the emperor smiled as he told him the truth about who had actually landed the blow to his face. This shocked the baron, but before he could fully express himself, he was punished with death. The emperor sliced open his chest with his sword in the same second. The body of the fragile aristocrat fell lifeless on the cold floor. The people who had gathered around during the incident whispered negatively now. In turn, the aristocrats began to shout words in support of the deceased, justifying his noble status, as well as expressing their distrust regarding the words of the envoy from another country. The main hero silently watched the situation, his appetite ruined, and it seemed that was all he cared about. The emperor responded meekly to all the people's claims regarding the events, with a threat. More precisely, with an invitation for them to come talk to him, which essentially meant the same thing. Meanwhile, the fox goddess was grumbling dissatisfiedly at the king for leaving her alone, recounting her emotions in drunken ramblings to the girls, among whom was the princess of the empire, Ilbidel. She listened carefully to the fox, hoping to learn something about His Majesty the heir prince of Gerajeri. However, her plan to get the sea goddess drunk did not succeed. She only heard complaints from the fox herself. Sedna ran out onto the balcony, pointing to the moon, which in her opinion was visible in broad daylight. The girls were perplexed by this information, thinking that the fox was probably delirious. However, the goddess pointed to the water, where something golden was reflected, really resembling the moon. Then she jumped off the balcony into the pond and pulled out something golden moments later. In her drunken state, the fox was disappointed that it wasn't the moon. Seeing what the sea goddess had specifically retrieved from the water, the girls were surprised. It was a golden trionyx. The sea goddess wanted to give this object to the king of demons, when suddenly, he appeared behind her. Screaming that it was the moon, Sedna handed it to His Majesty Imbilden. The man didn't understand what it was until Hwian told him about the trionyx, while simultaneously the servant was already taking the drunk fox to her room on the king's orders. Not knowing what to do with this creature, the king ordered his subordinate to send the trionyx back to the pond. Hwian wanted to follow the order when suddenly the turtle spoke to the king of demons. She asked for his help. The trionyx implores the protagonist to fulfill one request. For the first time, he meets someone who hears him and does not run away. The turtle cannot offer anything in return, but is in great need of help. The demon king ignores her and intends to return her to the pond to leave. The prince becomes interested only when the turtle says she has a message for the emperor. The fox wakes up from the emperor's loud laughter. She sees the prince and the ruler of the country sitting on the floor and the moon she pulled out of the lake lying next to them. She runs up to the object and grabs it in her paws. At that moment, the Troinix can no longer tolerate this and sticks his head out of the shell to say who he is. The guys advise the fox to sleep a little longer after drinking. The Emperor does not understand why everyone in the room can hear the creature from the pond except him. The water goddess offers to help him with this. The protagonist, together with the others, goes to the pond where the Troinix lives. The turtle tells about the gates that are at the bottom of the pond. Mindel's owner ordered him to guard them until difficult times come in the Emperor's family. Now they need to empty the pond to get to them, which Sadna easily manages to do. She opens a passage through the water for the Emperor, the prince with his dragon servant, the knight, and the Troinix. On the bottom, there is a seal with the emblem of the imperial family. The turtle says that the master must stand on this emblem to open the gates. The boy hesitates a little, but still does it. At that moment, it becomes clear that the gates were a portal. The prince grabs the Emperor by the sleeve in an attempt to help him. The entire group finds themselves in an underground dungeon. Once Hweon comes to his senses, he begins to search for his master, while the dragon servant tries to revive him. The prince opens his eyes with difficulty. Meanwhile, Tae panics over the king's injury and quickly retrieves a special crystal to illuminate the room. Everyone is surprised that the dragon can use magic, even if only practical, and that only to a small extent. The Emperor notes that this place resembles an underground canal that was closed many years ago, with no way in or out. The Demon King explains that they were transported here through a summoning spell, but cannot return the same way. Suddenly, the main character notices blood on his shoulder from a bad landing on a sharp rock. The fox offers to heal him, but realizes that she is useless since there is no water nearby. Hweon comes to the rescue, as he always carries healing remedies and bandages with him, and they manage to apply a bandage. The Troinix is lying on his back and cannot get up, asking the group to flip him over, but the King of Hell is only getting angrier with him for leading them to such a place. They have no choice but to find the inheritance along the way. On their way, the Demon King asks the Emperor about the reasons for the bad times in his kingdom. It turns out that the aristocracy forces the contenders for the throne to fight for their support, resulting in the deaths of people like his mother and sisters. The Emperor is determined to put an end to this after his coronation and make the country better and more comfortable. Unexpectedly, arrows come flying at the group and they barely manage to dodge them. Only then does Mindel inform them that there are many traps in the corridor for unwanted guests. But it is too late as another attack begins. Towards the company consisting of the Emperor, the main protagonist Hweon, the fox goddess, and the golden turtle, spears were hurled. It seemed that danger awaited them at every turn. Fearlessly, Hweon shielded his highness, blocking the path of the spears with his own body. He was clearly determined to continue fighting and managed to fend off the attack with his sword. Another spear was thrown at the Demon King from the opposite direction, which he valiantly repelled with a kick. The heir to the throne observed that these two assistants only got along on the battlefield and in other emergency situations. The presence of traps on their path angered him, and he hoped not to encounter them in the future. The golden turtle informed Imbilden that it would be safe in the room with the inheritance. The group was distracted by something off to the side. Ahead, in complete darkness, the red eyes of a monster began to glow. This frightened the others, but the Demon King managed to make a snide remark. In the darkness, there were many red-hot eyes of strange creatures. Hweon informed the group that they were creatures from the demon world, and they revealed their true form as they emerged from the darkness. They were large, black creatures resembling evil dogs, with burning eyes and wings on their backs. They were very angry and showed their teeth to the invading humans. The demonic dogs growled and prepared to attack the company. Hweon, showing his courage, was ready to protect his master and the others who were also ready. While the man prepared to fend off the attack of the enraged monster dogs, thinking about how bad the situation was, the dogs suddenly calmly assumed a submissive position in front of them. This shocked Hweon. In the next moment, the dogs were happily wagging their tails, showing no signs of aggression. The Emperor was no less surprised than the man. The demon servant reported that he did not know the reason for such an outcome, but everything indicated the involvement of the Demon King. The monster dogs are part of the demon world and therefore must obey their king, the main protagonist. In order to conceal his involvement, His Majesty Imbilden pretended that the fox goddess was the reason why the demonic dogs calmed down and obeyed. This puts Sedna in an awkward position, but she quickly agrees to this. Meanwhile, the angry aristocrats quarrel that the whereabouts of His Majesty the Emperor have been unknown for 2 days. They are looking for him everywhere, but to no avail. There is talk of who and why the man disappeared. The witness to the disappearance told these people about what had happened earlier, but now she is forced to remain silent. Presumably, the emperor's advisors are trying to solve the situation with his disappearance. They decide to deal with the unit that serves only the emperor while his majesty is absent. Worried, the demonic dogs help the company to move forward, destroying everything unnecessary in their path. Hweon falsely rejoices that the fox goddess can control them. The demon king demonstratively praises the fox for her help, although he knows it is not true. On the other hand, Sedna is ecstatic about the praise from his majesty and ignores the fact that she does not contribute anything to the group. The golden trionyx announces that the group has arrived at their destination. In front of them, there is a large closed door with a magical pattern. Emperor Imbilden looks at the dogs, hoping that they can help open the door, but they run away instead. The emperor does not understand how they will get inside, as the door has no handle or lock. The king orders Hweon to break the door, and he easily slices it with his sword. The door is instantly destroyed, which surprises the emperor. Meanwhile, Imbilden and the others enter inside. As they penetrate into the room, torches light up and illuminate the place with a golden glow. A long corridor, glowing with gold and flames, leads them through mysterious ornaments on the walls that the demon servant draws their attention to. His Majesty, the Demon King, notices the resemblance of the ornament to his sword, which surprises everyone. The king notes that his sword is depicted in the picture, which is a national treasure of the state of Jerara, passed down in the royal family. The emperor is perplexed by the situation since the sword is depicted in the underground canal of his empire. How are these two countries related? The golden turtle informs His Majesty, the Demon King, that the picture depicts a demonic sword. This shocks Imbilden. Trionyx explains that the objects depicted in the ornament are a sword from the demonic world and a heavenly flute. The second object of the image is located right in the place of the inheritance. The turtle points to the precise location of the flute. The group approaches the box at the end of the corridor, covered in cobwebs and dust. The turtle says that only the true heir of the Khan's imperial family can open the box. The emperor carefully cleans the box of dust before opening his family's inheritance. He succeeds in doing so, indicating that he is the true heir of the empire. Inside the box is a pure white heavenly flute. The Demon King suggests blowing into the flute in the hope that something will happen. The emperor tries to play, but it sounds terrible. Suddenly, the golden trionyx is illuminated with golden light and rises high, called to his mistress by the melody. An old lady appears from the sky, praising her servant, the turtle, before embracing her. She tells the emperor how she got the flute and entrusts it to him. The day of coronation had arrived, and noble aristocrats had gathered in their most exquisite attire to congratulate His Majesty on this festive day. In the meantime, Princess Ilgadel's maid was styling her hair, offering her the best hairstyles. The girl asked her ward if the emperor had returned, to which she naively replied affirmatively. The girls discussed rumors about the disappearance of the emperor, and the heir prince who arrived in Kaunas as a representative. The princess speculated that something terrible had happened. In the temple, the emperor's subjects had already gathered in anticipation of the coronation and subsequent feast. Meanwhile, a high-ranking man who had previously declared his nephew as the reserve emperor learned from a subordinate that the squad they had decided to remove without Julius' permission had disappeared without a trace the previous evening. The man ordered them to find and eliminate them, as well as to eliminate the emperor himself if he appeared. The servant claimed that the emperor was most likely dead. Due to his previous resistance to the aristocracy, Emperor Julius was now in danger, and all the knights of the imperial court were looking for him with orders to kill. The solemn coronation began, and all the noble subjects rejoiced in anticipation of the festivities. The gates of the temple opened, and a man in royal robes walked into the hall, whose task now was to become the head of the Khan's empire. People were in deep shock just at the sight of this man, as it was not the previously known Julius. The stranger was the firstborn of Duke Elgar. The priest began his speech, conveying the sad news of the replacement of the original heir due to the absence of the emperor. Princess Ilgadel protested against such events, but the aforementioned man, Duke Elgar, informed her that Julius had himself refused the throne. The princess was resolute and insisted on canceling the coronation until the emperor was found. Understanding what was happening, the aristocrats were shocked and protested against the coronation of the duke's son. Elgar silenced them with threats and also threatened the princess with taking her place as the Empress of Kaunas. The holy minister continues the ceremony of the coronation of the heir to the Kaunas empire and the envoy of the heavens. In the temple, everyone remains humbly silent as the bishop reads his rites. The newly crowned emperor holds his head high in front of the public. Princess Iguadel is in shock but forced to remain silent, only hoping for Julius' return. The ceremony is interrupted by a deafening bang of the doors behind all the invited lords, causing them to quickly turn around. The knight wounded in the back falls onto the red carpet and dies before everyone's eyes. The aristocracy is in complete horror and panic ensues. The subjects are afraid, but only until the true emperor of the Khan's empire, Julius, enters the temple. The princess is overjoyed to see his majesty. The aristocrats are still in shock, and at the same time, the emperor approaches the coronation spot. The duke is surprised, but he does not show it directly. The embittered emperor openly vents his anger on him and threatens him with punishment. Knights surround the emperor and point their spears at him on the duke's orders, but this does not frighten Julius at all. The heir to the empire openly declares the duke's betrayal, which sparks a dispute between them in front of the subjects. The duke tries hard to blame the emperor for the situation, but Julius has something to say in response. Elgar protests and tries to overthrow the throne's successor with his accusations. In response, Julius only laughs loudly. The princess is concerned for his majesty. The emperor does not deny his guilt, but still places greater blame on the duke and draws his sword against him. Julius commands his squad to kill all the emperor's traitors, who quickly appear in the temple and rush into battle. A devastating fight between the emperor's squad, who were so eager to eliminate the duke earlier, and the knights who serve the emperor breaks out. Earthly elves come to the temple to help the heir to the throne in the battle. With their magic, they destroy the enemy's weapons. The duke is surprised by their appearance. The demon king tells him that they are fulfilling the promise made to him personally. This completely astonishes Elgar. His Majesty Imbilden publicly humiliates the duke for his behavior. In response, the man shouts to kill the representative of another country, also the heir to the throne, Jerira. The knights rush into battle to kill the demon king, but Hweon protects him. He swiftly deflects the attack and they scatter in all directions. The main hero is confident in their defeat, so he tells them that they can try to attack him. His Majesty, the King of Demons, is highly motivated by the battle and plans to fight. He draws his sword. Meanwhile, the Duke is in complete shock. The heir to the empire speaks of the inevitable death of the Duke, as well as his pitiful condition. The aristocrats quickly perish at the hands of the imperial army and in the melee of the battle. Elgar tries hard to shame Julius for causing the bloody chaos in the sacred temple, but the emperor does not consider it a problem. In order to prove his rightful claim to the throne and the sanctity of his inheritance, the emperor takes out his celestial flute and begins to play. His melody summons a large golden trionyx, now resembling more of a dragon than a turtle. The flute transforms the spiritual creature into a sacred one. The trionyx descends from the sky to the sound of the pipe. The surviving aristocrats marvel at what is happening. The priest bows to the emperor, saying that he has received a sacred creature. All the people bow to the emperor, paying their respect to him. The knights begin to believe in the emperor, and therefore drop their weapons, kneeling before his majesty. The duke falls to his knees, either defeated or obedient to the will of Julius. Only one princess, Ilgadel, stands and smiles, watching the new ruler of the Khan's empire. The true ruler. The girl greets Julius, and he is happy to meet her. The situation with the rebellion against the emperor has ended, but the bloody repression continued for several more days. Thus, the emperor crushed all traitors and those who could have become them. He also gained the patronage of a sacred creature and received full recognition from the aristocrats as a ruler. In the chambers of the King of Demons, Julius enters, and the prince, along with Hweon, bows to him, causing discomfort for his majesty. Later, a more ordinary conversation ensues between him and the protagonists. The emperor notices that the king is completely wet, so he wants to know the reason. Imbilden tells him that it was the fox goddess. It turns out that the goddess tried to heal his majesty's wound, but it didn't work out and chaos ensued. The servant dragon complains that he now has more worries because of this situation. The emperor is very surprised that the King of Demons' wound has not healed. The protagonist explains that it's due to the unique structure of the royal family's organism, but he is obviously lying. Imbilden tells how he is weak without the help of the sea goddess, which surprises Julius with his bravery. In gratitude, the emperor asks the prince what he would like to receive from him. However, the king does not know what he wants, so the emperor suggests that the prince become his younger brother. The leader of the Khan's empire proposes to the main protagonist to become his younger brother, explaining that he wants to be closer to Imbilden and take care of the heir to the throne, Prince Jerira, as if he were his own relative. The demon king ponders over what this can give him. Being related to the emperor literally means establishing a connection between the two countries and improving international relations. His Majesty Imbilden agrees on the condition that their status is equal to each other. Julius delivers a stunning speech before the Demon King, impressing him with his words. Then the emperor shows his sacred animal, the Trionyx, which can now skillfully change its size, becoming tiny. The main protagonist agrees to become a brother, putting forward one more condition: to sign in his magical book. The emperor signs as proof of their kinship now. The men make a vow, promising never to betray each other. The moment of the main protagonist's departure back to his homeland has come. The emperor and the princess plan to get married. The Demon King congratulates them, to which the princess asks to invite them to Gerera. The fox goddess says goodbye to the princess, dreaming of a drink. Julius and his fiancée are waiting for His Majesty Imbilden for their wedding. He is not particularly eager to come. The emperor embraces the main protagonist, surprising him. It was a farewell from an older brother. Julius tousles the hair on the king's head, like a younger brother, nearly receiving a scolding from the king. His Majesty's knights quietly chuckle at this. The brothers ask each other to take care, and finally, Imbilden, together with his entourage, sets off on his journey home. This concludes the first season of this manhwa. If you want me to make a continuation, please support me with a like and comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any new videos.